Karissa Boudreau was your very typical 12-year-old. She lived with her mom Penny and her boyfriend Vernon McCumber in an apartment close to the Sobeys where Penny worked as a cashier. She had recently gone to live with her dad Paul because, as many a 12-year-old girl before her, she sometimes didn't get along with her mom. Typical 12-year-old stuff. Any of you that have ever been mothers, stepmothers, or adopted mothers to a 12-year-old girl, you know what I'm talking about. The eye rolling and sighing and shrugging responses of whatever. I feel you. I was there too. It's not you, it's the hormones. But she found that she missed her mom, so she went back to live with her. Around the early dinner hour of January 27th, 2008, Penny and Carissa drove to the Sobeys to get a few items. Penny and Carissa argued a bit in the car, so Penny went into Sobeys, leaving Carissa to brood in the car alone. When she returned, Carissa wasn't in the car. Figuring she had stormed off, she walked the parking lot and then got into the car and drove around to look for her. She went to all the places where she might have gone to cool off, but she couldn't find her. She had left her cell phone behind, so she couldn't be very far. But by 8:30 that night, she'd realized she wasn't going to be able to locate her without help, and there was a cold snap set to come in soon, so she reached out to the police for help. She gave the police the description and picture of Carissa and told them that she'd been wearing pink Crocs, jeans, t-shirt, black hoodie, and a black vest. An investigation was immediately begun as the police did not believe that she had simply left on her own due to the state of her dress and that she had left her cell phone behind and the weather prediction. And Penny pled for her daughter's safe return in a police press conference. 2 days later, an unnamed man was driving on William Hebb Road in Hebbville, Nova Scotia, when he noticed something pink that looked like a sandal that was laying in the snow on the side of the road. He remembered hearing a press release about a missing young girl wearing pink Crocs. He stopped his car and took a closer look, and it was in fact a pink Croc. He turned it over to the police, and they later determined that the shoe did belong to Carissa and contained her DNA. For almost 2 weeks, residents, volunteers, and the police searched for the missing 12-year-old, hoping that she was going to be found alive. On February 9th, 2008, just before the lunch hour, an unnamed woman and her son were driving on Highway 331 when she fatefully pulled over at a turnaround so that her son could have a pee. Her son, who was only 9 at the time, went to the edge of the embankment overlooking the Le Havre River when he saw what appeared to be a human toes sticking out of the snow. The poor boy screamed for his mother, who went to his side and also observed the toes peeking out. And they flagged down a passing motorist and had him confirm what they had seen over the embankment, not quite believing it. Maybe it was just a mannequin, which we all know it never is. The RCMP Major Crimes Unit and a detective from the Bridgewater Police arrived and found a young Caucasian female who, based on her appearance and what she was wearing, appeared to be Karissa Boudreau. Dr. Matt Bowes, who's the chief forensic pathologist for the province of Nova Scotia, actually went to the scene, and he determined that based on the way that the body was positioned, which was in this splayed position, which suggested to him that there was no rigor mortis at the time that she was placed there. So she was likely killed and then placed there just after her death. The position of the body and the state in which Carissa was discovered was not released to the public and remained as holdback evidence. This included how her clothes were on her and some of the items found that had not been reported in the media as things that she had been wearing or had with her at the time that she was reported missing. There were noted ligature marks found around Carissa's neck, and based on how and where her body had come to rest, they figured that somebody had struggled with Carissa somewhere up the hill from the river and that her body had been dumped there. On February 13th, 2008, an autopsy was finally completed by Dr. Matt Bowes, who had to take a couple of days to allow her remains to thaw, and he determined that the cause of death was asphyxiation and the method was strangulation, and other than the marks on her neck, she had no other injuries. Her remains were identified by Dr. Paul Miller, who's a dental surgeon who reviewed x-rays of her teeth. Karissa Boudreau's body had been found with her jeans only on her right lower leg, and her panties were down to her knees. So this gave the impression that she may have been the victim of a sexual assault, but there were no obvious signs of sexual intercourse, and a sexual assault was later ruled out, thankfully. Karissa was wearing a pink t-shirt, gray bra, white panties with Winnie the Pooh design, blue jeans, and one brown sock with kind of multicolored horizontal stripes on it. The other sock was found inside the pant leg of her jeans. And the RCMP simply had no suspects. They had no leads on who could have possibly done this. So they went to see a little bit more about Carissa's history. Maybe something about her past or a secret life she was living would provide some clues. Thankfully, police did not find any evidence of a double life. There was no 20 something secret boyfriend, no online predators. The only thing they did find was a couple of notes written by Carissa herself when she was feeling down and writing about her feelings. Both notes were dated December 2nd, 2008, which the police believe were actually supposed to read 2007 and not 2008. The first note read, "I'm mad because number one, mom is engaged to Vernon. Number two, mom made me move here. Three, mom broke up with Shane. Four, I want a bigger room. Five, I don't like living with Vernon. The end. My life is ruined," by Carissa with a heart and then a star. And the second one read, "I'm sad because one, I have to go to school tomorrow. Two, I miss Shane and Tracy. Three, I have to go to bed at 9:30 instead of 11. Four, I live in an apartment. Five, there's no room for my stuff. Six, I feel crowded. End of story. My life sucks until we live in a house," by Carissa. Now, for a little bit of background, Penny and Paul had divorced when she was pregnant with Carissa, and Carissa is an only child. Penny then went on to live with Paul's brother Shane for about 10 years, and this didn't seem to cause too much of a family rift. It was just sort of how things panned out for them. I guess they both realized Penny was better off with Shane than Paul. Anyways, when Carissa was about 10 or 11, they split up, and this devastated Carissa, who loved Shane like a second father and I guess uncle. Penny then took up with Vernon, who Carissa didn't really like that much. Now, normally this would be seen as typical 12-year-old angst, but police started to wonder because they remembered that on February 11th, 2008, at 3:20 p.m., Penny and Vernon's downstairs neighbors had called the police that there was a bit of a ruckus and reported that it sounded like Penny was agitated and throwing things around. Vernon and Penny were pacing back and forth in the apartment, and he was telling her that he was leaving her. And they went into the bathroom at some point. Water was running, and it sounded like Penny was in the bathtub. And Vernon was saying over and over, "Pen, how could you do this?" He was disgusted with her. He was saying, "Pen, Pen, come on, speak, Pen. How could you do this? How could you do this? I don't understand. You got me involved." And then he said that he wasn't going to help her. So that's a bit suspicious. On February 14th, 2008, at 9:43 in the morning, Penny and Vernon both attended the Bridgewater Police Department by the request of Constable John Elliott, who was of the Major Crimes Unit. And the purpose was to notify them that they had found human remains and that they had been positively identified as Carissa. Penny and Vernon were arrested for the murder of Carissa and then were interviewed. And Penny declined to provide a statement. Penny also notably didn't ask how Carissa had died. And trust me, it's the first question you ask. A grief-stricken person always needs to know. But they could only hold him for about 24 hours because they simply didn't have enough evidence at this point. On February 25th, 2008, a citizen was at the playground adjacent to the swimming pool, which is located at 154 Jubilee Road in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. And he noted a wood trash bin beside the building at the swimming pool and decided to check it for recyclables. And when he opened the trash bin, he saw what he thought was a pink sandal. And he didn't give it too much thought until he spoke with his fiancée later about it. And together they returned to the pool and looked again and confirmed that, yes, indeed, there was a pink crock inside the bin. So they called the Bridgewater Police Department and they came out. And he told the police that he had checked the bin about a month earlier. At that time, there wasn't anything inside of it. And the responding officer photographed and seized the size 8 pink crock, a black hoodie, and a black vest from inside that wooden trash bin. And the crock that was seized from the William Hebb Road area on January 29th was a matching, this one was a left, and the other one that they found was a right. They were both size 8 in pink. And this was not released to the general public and was again holdback evidence. Paul was also growing suspicious of Penny, who seemed more concerned about Vernon's sore knee at the funeral than she did about her dead daughter. On February 14th, 2008, while Penny and Vernon were in custody being held for 24 hours of questioning, a cellmate, who happened to be an undercover officer, was utilized. They didn't get anything out of them, however. They did sort of build a little bit of a bond between him and Vernon and this undercover operator. And on February 25th, 2008, a meeting occurred between Vernon and this undercover officer. that he had met in that cell. And a conversation took place in which Vernon was given an opportunity to work for this undercover operator. And this undercover operator met with him on several occasions over the next couple weeks under the guise that they were providing him work for a crime syndicate. This wide scale undercover operation began utilizing a number of scenarios to gain the trust of Vernon, and police decided to start what is called a Mr. Big sting. Now, this is a Canadian thing where police will go undercover, usually acting as that they're working for a crime boss syndicate and offer to get rid of a legal problem for a suspect. And one of the conditions is that you have to tell the whole story of what they did in order to sort of cover all their bases. And it surprisingly works a lot of the time. On April 1st, 2008, Penny and Vernon moved from their apartment at 220 Jubilee Road in Bridgewater and relocated to apartments in Halifax. On April 16th, 2008, during a meeting with this undercover cop, Vernon made comments to the effect that he had nothing to do with the murder of Karissa. He said that he was asleep at the time. He also said that he had suspected that Penny had murdered her daughter, and he was still living with her in order to keep her close so that she would not implicate him in the murder. On May 3rd, 2008, the undercover officers were able to convince Vernon that they required the services of a female to assist in this some job that they were going to be doing. And Vernon was asked to approach Penny and have her meet this undercover officer. So this meeting was arranged, and Penny actually became very active with this undercover operator and all of their work that they were doing. So on May 8th, 2008 was the 3-month anniversary of the discovery of Carissa's body, and several local media outlets carried some stories about the case. Now, the investigators were aware that she had been really bothered by some media reports that had named her place of employment, and they commented on the potential value of DNA evidence. So during a meeting with the undercover cops on May 14th, 2008, she made this comment that she wished that the police exhibit vault would burn down or blow up or something. And on June 11th, 2008, Penny met with another undercover officer and was led to believe that this officer had connections and could possibly make her problem go away for her. And the undercover operator maintained that he was the head of this crime syndicate and that Penny would have to tell him everything about what had happened to her daughter in order for him to understand her situation and what he could do to help her out. So Penny disclosed the following details to this undercover operator with regards to the events of January 27th, 2008. She and Vernon were having issues because of Karissa, and Vernon had actually given her an ultimatum to either pick him or Karissa. And she said that Vernon had nothing at all to do with the murder, and it was her that had strangled Karissa. She said that it was Sunday, January 27th, the day that she killed Karissa. She said that Karissa and her went for a drive around sometime between 3 and 4 p.m. And they drove for a couple of hours to Lunenburg and then back, and then they were talking. And she felt things got a little out of hand, and both of them were angry. So she said she did what she had to do. So she drove to the Sobeys parking lot around 5:30, went in to get some juice and bacon, and Karissa was still in the vehicle at that time and she was still alive. She called Vernon to tell him that Karissa was not in the car when she came out of Sobeys. So she left a message on their phone and she returned to the car, put the groceries in the trunk, and while she did that, she grabbed a piece of beige twine and put it in her pocket because she knew she had to do away with her. So Carissa kept wanting to get out of the car, so Penny waited until it was dark and drove to William Head Road and told Carissa that if she wanted to get out, then get out. And she said that she couldn't let her go back and tell people what a horrible mom she was. So they both got out of the car. It was a snowy, dark night, and she went to grab her, but it was slippery. So she pushed back and tackled her, and Carissa fell onto her back. And the only thing that Carissa had said to her was, "Mummy, don't." She said that Carissa was scared, so she used her knee on Carissa's chest to pin her down. Now, Carissa's hands were under her, so she couldn't move her hands, and Penny used her knees to pin her down so that she couldn't fight back. So she was face to face with her at this point. She wrapped the rope around her hands and put the rope around Carissa's neck and pulled in a crisscross motion with all of her strength until she could no longer feel her breathing. Throughout all of this, Penny said she could feel Carissa trying to move her hands and that they were digging at the ground. Her eyes were bulging, her tongue was stuck between her teeth, and foam and drool was coming from her mouth, and she could hear her heaving for air. She said when there was no more breathing, she dragged Carissa's body and put her in the passenger side of the vehicle mostly on like a heap on the floor, and then drove back to Bridgewater to decide what to do next. She placed the twine in an empty Tim Hortons cup, which she then threw in a garbage can at the Tim Hortons on High Street. She drove to King Street, past Pendleton's store and the turnaround spot. She parked the car, turned it and the lights off, and dragged Carissa's body out of the car using her blue jeans as leverage. So Carissa's pants, her pink underwear, and striped socks came off as she was dragging her into that, like, sort of over the edge of the bank. She felt this would make people think that Carissa had been sexually assaulted. She stated that her hoodie and vest had come off, so she was just wearing her t-shirt with one pant leg in her jeans. She then rolled her over the edge of the bank, knowing that the weather was calling for lots of snow and that she wouldn't be found for a while. And she landed amongst some trees, and she did not hit the river. She got back into her car, took the hoodie, vest, and crock, and threw them in the garbage can by the Bridgewater swimming pool. It was then that she realized that she had only had the one crock. She went home around 7 to 7:30 and told Vernon that Chris was missing. She called the police around 8 p.m. She called family, friends, and teachers to check with them on her, just under a guise of, oh, she's missing. She said she would do anything for Vernon, and the thought of losing him was harder than the thought of losing her daughter. Penny also provided a physical reenactment to that person that was working undercover. And during that meeting, she just wanted to explain her actions, I guess, against Carissa. After having described all that had occurred, she used a pen and paper to write this detailed handwritten account of what she had done as well, like a written confession, I guess. Penny agreed to travel back to this Bridgewater area with the undercover operator to show him where the murder had happened and where the body had been dumped. So she directed him to that William Hebb Road where she had murdered her daughter. This was the same location where that crock was located on January 29th. Penny again provided a verbal and visual account of what had occurred at that location and then directed them to this location near La Have River where Carissa's body had been dumped and provided the details of what had occurred there as well. She indicated that she had been considering the murder for several days prior to the event itself. So when Penny had gone to the Halifax area, she turned over something of clothing to this undercover operators that she had mentioned that she had been wearing at the time of the murder. So, on the morning of June 14th, 2008, Penny was arrested and interviewed by the Truth Verification Section of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is kind of cool that that's a thing. I like that title. But she didn't admit anything at all during that interview. And in the afternoon, she was shown sort of a portion of the video of her meeting with this undercover cop on June 11th, in which she had told all about this killing her daughter. And at that point, she admitted to having murdered Carissa and basically said the same thing that she'd said during the undercover operation. Penny was charged with one count of first-degree murder and then arrested on June 14th. Crowds of people booed at her when she was being moved from the courthouse to jail in handcuffs. On January 27, 2009, a candlelight vigil was held with over 200 people in attendance at Shipyard's Landing Market. On January 30th, 2009, Penny pled guilty to second-degree murder to avoid a trial, and she was sentenced to a life sentence with no parole eligibility for 20 years. But by October 2019, after serving only 10 years, she had been granted 6 escorted leaves to go to church every second month. And the board stated in their decision, the board notes your reported acceptance by members of the church congregation, your continued welcome by the church's staff, and the evidence of the importance of spirituality as a continuing part of your correctional plan.